They wouldn't let her fly the F-22. Not because she wasn't ready, but because she was a woman who flew better than all of them. Sabotaged, grounded, laughed out of the sky. But then the captain caught a glimpse of the tattoo on her neck, and everything changed. That symbol wasn't just a tattoo, it was a secret only top-tier intelligence would recognize. She's not who they think she is, and when the base is attacked, she's the only one who can stop what's coming. What happens when the woman they dismissed is the last hope standing? Every time I see your comments, it reminds me how stories connect us all. Let me know where you're watching from, and let's get started. Lieutenant Cassandra Thorne stepped onto the tarmac at Langley Air Force Base, her boots clicking against the concrete as the Virginia sun beat down. Her heart raced with a mixture of pride and determination. After years of hard work and proving herself in combat over Syria, she had finally made it, the first woman selected for the elite F-22 Raptor program. The sleek, angular shapes of the advanced fighters lined up on the flight line made her breath catch. She had dreamed of flying these magnificent machines since her days at the Air Force Academy. The wind whipped her dark hair, which was pulled back in a regulation-perfect style, as she straightened her shoulders and headed toward the squadron building. "Lieutenant Thorne reporting for duty, sir," she said crisply, saluting Colonel Marcus Brennan. The squadron commander's stern face remained impassive as he returned her salute with mechanical precision. "Lieutenant," he said, his cold eyes scanning her with obvious disapproval. "I must say your placement here raises some concerns about unit cohesion. This is an elite squadron with no room for social experiments." Cass kept her expression neutral, though his words stung. "With respect, sir, my record speaks for itself. Top of my class at the academy, over 1,000 combat hours in Syria." Yes, Brennan cut her off with a dismissive wave. "I've read your file. We'll see how that translates to the real challenges of the F-22 program." As if on cue, a group of pilots entered the room, led by a tall, handsome man whose perfect appearance matched his arrogant bearing. Lieutenant Commander Derek Hawthorne barely glanced at Cass before turning to Colonel Brennan. "Sir, we're ready for the morning briefing," Hawthorne said, purposefully ignoring her presence. "Very well." Brennan gestured to the group. "Lieutenant Thorne, meet your fellow pilots. I suggest you pay close attention. The learning curve here is steep." The other pilots filed past her with barely a nod, some openly smirking. Their disdain was clear in every subtle gesture and sideways glance. One muttered something under his breath that made his companion snicker. Only Captain James Rodriguez, call sign Viper, met her eyes directly as he entered. The flight instructor's sharp features and graying temples gave him a distinguished appearance, and his gaze was evaluating but not hostile. He gave her a professional nod before taking his seat. During the briefing, Hawthorne made several pointed comments about maintaining the highest standards while looking directly at Cass. When she offered an observation about tactical approaches based on her combat experience, he cut her off mid-sentence. "We do things differently here, Lieutenant," he said with false politeness. "Perhaps you should focus on learning our methods before offering suggestions." Cass felt her face flush but kept her composure. She had faced plenty of skepticism before and overcome it through sheer competence. This would be no different. After the briefing, Captain Rodriguez approached her as the others filed out. "Lieutenant Thorne," he said quietly, "a word of advice: watch, learn, and let your flying do the talking." She nodded gratefully at this small show of professional courtesy. "Thank you, sir. That's exactly what I intend to do." As she organized her materials, she overheard Hawthorne speaking to another pilot just outside the door. "How long do you think she'll last?" "I give her 2 weeks before she washes out." Cass took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. She had earned her place here, regardless of what they thought. The small, winged dagger tattoo on her neck, a reminder of missions they knew nothing about, seemed to burn beneath her collar. They had no idea what she was truly capable of, and that was exactly as it needed to be. Looking out the window at the F-22s gleaming in the sunlight, she allowed herself a small smile. Let them underestimate her. She had faced worse odds in the skies over Syria, flying missions that would never appear in her official record. Their prejudice would make it easier to maintain her cover while she carried out her real mission, investigating the security leaks that threatened the entire F-22 program. The hostility she faced today was just the beginning, but Cassandra Thorne had never backed down from a challenge. She would prove herself in the air, where it mattered most, and maybe, just maybe, she would change some minds along the way. For now, though, she had a job to do, one that went far beyond simply being the first woman in the squadron. She gathered her materials and headed to her assigned locker, ignoring the way conversation stopped when she entered the room. The real test would come tomorrow in the air, and that was where she intended to shine, even if she had to deliberately hold back to maintain her cover. Cass noticed the first signs of sabotage 3 days into her assignment. Her flight suit's oxygen connections had been loosened just enough to create a subtle leak, something that could have been deadly at high altitude. She caught it during her pre-flight check, her experienced hands detecting the tampering immediately. Standing in the equipment room, she carefully examined her gear, while appearing to simply go through routine checks. Lieutenant Commander Hawthorne and 2 other pilots lounged near the doorway, watching her with poorly concealed smirks. "Having equipment troubles, Lieutenant?" Hawthorne called out, his voice dripping with false concern. "Perhaps the technical aspects of the F-22 program are proving too challenging?" Cass tightened the connection without looking up. "No, sir, just being thorough." "Good," he said. "We wouldn't want any accidents." The threat was clear in his tone. As he walked away, she heard him speaking loudly to the others. "It's what happens when they prioritize political correctness over actual qualifications. Someone's going to get hurt." Over the next week, the sabotage escalated. Her helmet communications system mysteriously developed static during crucial training exercises. Her flight planning software contained incorrect data about fuel consumption rates. Each morning, she found new problems that required careful checking and quiet fixing. During one pre-flight inspection, she discovered her auxiliary power unit had been tampered with. The sophisticated system had been adjusted just enough to cause performance issues without triggering safety alerts. It was the kind of sabotage that required intimate knowledge of the F-22 systems and access to restricted areas. Cass documented everything meticulously in an encrypted file on her personal device, photographing the evidence while pretending to check her phone. She knew she couldn't report it, not without compromising her deeper mission to investigate security leaks in the program. Any complaint would just reinforce their narrative about her being unable to handle pressure. The social isolation was equally calculated. She would arrive for informal briefings only to find the location had been changed without notice. Critical information about training exercises was shared during casual conversations in the officers' club. Conversations that happened when she wasn't present. "Sorry, Lieutenant," Hawthorne would say with a practiced, innocent expression. "Must have forgotten to update you about the change in briefing location. You understand how busy things get around here." One morning, she entered the ready room to find several pilots huddled around a computer, laughing. They quickly dispersed when they saw her, but not before she caught a glimpse of a doctored photo showing her crashing an aircraft. The message was clear. They were waiting for her to fail. Captain Rodriguez remained professionally neutral, but his eyes showed concern when he observed the squadron's behavior. During one flight exercise, he switched to a private channel. "Lieutenant Thorne," he said quietly, "your performance seems inconsistent, almost as if you're having equipment issues." "Nothing I can't handle, sir," she replied carefully. There was a long pause. "Make sure you're documenting everything," he said finally. "Just in case." She was already doing exactly that. Her secure files contained dates, times, and photographs of every instance of tampering. The evidence was building, but she couldn't use it, not yet. Her real mission was too important. The situation reached a new level when she discovered her maintenance logs had been altered, making it appear she had signed off on incomplete safety checks. It was a serious accusation that could end her career. She found Hawthorne waiting near her locker afterward, his expression smug. "Problem with your paperwork, Lieutenant?" he asked. "You really should be more careful with documentation. Safety is our top priority here." Cass met his gaze steadily. Thank you for your concern, sir. I'll be sure to double-check everything. That night, alone in her quarters, she reviewed her growing file of evidence while considering her options. The sabotage was becoming more dangerous, moving beyond mere harassment to potentially lethal tampering. But reporting it would mean an investigation, which would draw attention to her presence in the squadron. That could compromise her mission to uncover who was leaking classified F-22 technology specifications. She touched the concealed tattoo on her neck, remembering the classified missions that had earned her this assignment. The Air Force needed to know who was selling their secrets, and she was their best chance at finding out. If that meant enduring this campaign of harassment and sabotage, then that's what she would do. Cass closed her laptop and began her nightly equipment inspection ritual. Tomorrow would bring new attempts to undermine her, but she would persist. She had faced worse odds in combat, flying missions that would never appear in any official record. She would maintain her cover, document everything, and complete her mission, no matter what they threw at her. For now, that meant checking every piece of equipment 3 times, arriving early to inspect her aircraft, and pretending not to notice the orchestrated campaign against her. She was a better pilot than they knew, and she would prove it, but not yet. Not until her real mission was complete. The simulator room hummed with tension as Cass stepped into the cockpit. She could feel the eyes of the entire squadron watching her, their expressions a mix of anticipation and poorly concealed hostility. Colonel Brennan stood at the observation console, his stern face revealing nothing. "Standard combat scenario, Lieutenant Thorne," he announced. "Let's see how you handle yourself." The simulator canopy closed with a soft hiss. Cass's hands moved automatically through the startup sequence, but something felt off immediately. The stick response was sluggish, as if moving through molasses. She made a small adjustment, compensating for the altered controls. The virtual runway appeared on her screen. "Tower, Raptor 2-1, ready for takeoff," she called, keeping her voice steady despite knowing what was coming. "Raptor 2-1, you're cleared for takeoff." Captain Rodriguez's voice came through her headset. Cass advanced the throttle smoothly, but the simulator's engine response was erratic. The aircraft lurched forward unevenly, fighting her inputs. She could practically feel Hawthorne's smirk through the canopy as she struggled with the deliberately miscalibrated controls. The simulated F-22 finally lifted off, wallowing in the air like a drunk pelican. Cass's jaw tightened. She had flown real combat missions in Syria with battle damage that handled better than this rigged simulator. But she couldn't show her true skill level, not without compromising her cover. "Entering combat zone," the automated system announced. "Multiple bogies detected." Virtual enemy fighters appeared on her radar. Under normal circumstances, she could have outmaneuvered them easily. She had done it countless times in classified missions, flying prototype aircraft that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. But today she had to fail, and fail spectacularly. The simulator's controls continued fighting her as she engaged the first enemy aircraft. Her attempts at basic combat maneuvers resulted in wild overcorrections. The stick suddenly froze for a critical second during a defensive turn, leaving her exposed. "Missile lock detected," the warning system blared. Cass could have recovered. Even with the sabotage controls, she saw 3 possible escape routes. Instead, she let the simulated missile strike her aircraft. The simulator shuddered as warning lights flooded the cockpit. "Raptor 2-1 is hit." Rodriguez's voice carried genuine concern. She made a show of struggling with the failing systems, watching as her virtual aircraft spiraled toward the ground. The crash sequence played out in vivid detail on the screens around her. The canopy opened to reveal Colonel Brennan's thunderous expression. "Absolutely unacceptable, Lieutenant," he bellowed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "The F-22 is the most advanced fighter in our arsenal. It requires pilots who can handle its sophisticated systems." Cass stood at attention, her face carefully blank as Brennan continued his public dress down. "Your performance today demonstrates a fundamental lack of basic flight competency. I'm removing you from flight status effective immediately." "Sir, if I could explain," she started, playing her part. "There's nothing to explain, Lieutenant," Brennan cut her off. "Your presence in this program was an experiment, and it has failed. Spectacularly. The other pilots watched with barely concealed satisfaction. Hawthorne's smug smile confirmed what she already knew. They had sabotaged her simulator controls. She had seen the evidence when she arrived early that morning, noting the altered calibration settings and modified response curves in the system logs. As she gathered her flight gear, her hand brushed against the small data drive hidden in her pocket. It contained detailed records of the tampering, including security footage she had discreetly captured showing 2 pilots accessing the simulator's maintenance panel the night before. It was solid proof of their sabotage, proof she couldn't use without revealing her true purpose at Langley. Captain Rodriguez approached as she was leaving. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "I've seen your combat record. Today's performance doesn't match your experience level." "Sometimes we just have bad days, sir," she replied, careful to keep her voice neutral. He studied her face for a moment. "Yes, we do. Especially when certain factors are working against us." Cass returned to her quarters, closing the door before allowing her composed expression to fade. The weight of her secret mission pressed down on her shoulders. She was one of the Air Force's most elite test pilots, with hundreds of hours in experimental aircraft that officially didn't exist. She had flown combat missions that would remain classified for decades, and now she had to accept being labeled incompetent, had to endure the smirks and whispers, had to watch her career apparently crash and burn. All while investigating who was selling classified details about the F-22 program to foreign powers. She pulled out her secure laptop and added today's evidence to her growing file. The simulator's data logs clearly showed the tampering, and her hidden camera had captured Hawthorne and another pilot making the modifications. But she couldn't report it. Not yet. Someone was leaking sensitive technology specifications, and her humiliating failure today might help reveal who it was. For now, she had to accept being grounded, had to play the role of the failed female pilot who couldn't handle the pressure. Her real mission was too important to risk over wounded pride, no matter how much the injustice burned. Captain James Rodriguez sat in his office, reviewing flight data from the past week. Something wasn't adding up. He'd been flying fighters for 15 years, training countless pilots, and his instincts were screaming that there was more to Lieutenant Thorne than met the eye. He pulled up the video from her simulator failure. Frame by frame, he studied her responses. Despite the erratic behavior of her aircraft, her initial control inputs were textbook perfect. Too perfect for someone supposedly struggling with basic flight operations. Even more telling were the split-second corrections she made before each system malfunction, as if she anticipated the failures before they occurred. "You're not incompetent," he muttered, leaning back in his chair. "You're holding back." The morning briefing room was already half full when Viper arrived. He took his usual seat near the front, watching as the other pilots filtered in. Lieutenant Thorne entered last, her posture rigid as she found an isolated seat in the back corner. The other pilots shifted subtly away from her, maintaining their wall of exclusion. Colonel Brennan began his standard operational briefing, but Viper's attention was divided. He watched Thorne from the corner of his eye, noting how she maintained perfect military bearing despite the hostile environment. Her note-taking was precise and economical, the movements of someone with far more experience than her official record suggested. A slight movement caught his eye as she reached up to adjust her collar. The motion pulled her flight suit slightly askew, revealing a small mark on her neck that she usually kept carefully hidden. Viper's breath caught in his throat. There, partially visible beneath her collar, was a distinctive tattoo, a small winged dagger with a very specific pattern of notches on the blade. His mind raced back to his time in military intelligence, to a classified briefing in a windowless room deep beneath the Pentagon. That symbol marked members of the Ghost Wing, an ultra-secret Air Force unit that officially didn't exist. They were the elite of the elite, test pilots who flew experimental aircraft on missions that would never appear in any record. Viper forced himself to look away, his heart pounding. The pieces started falling into place. Her two perfect basic maneuvers, her careful maintenance of a facade of incompetence, the way she documented everything while accepting the squadron's abuse without complaint. She wasn't here to prove herself as the first female F-22 pilot. She was here for something else entirely. The briefing continued, but Viper barely heard it. His mind was racing through the implications. If Thorn was Ghostwing, her presence at Langley wasn't about breaking gender barriers. It was about something far more serious. The unit was only activated for the most critical national security missions. He watched her more carefully now, noting the subtle signs he should have seen earlier. The way she constantly scanned the room, maintaining awareness of every exit. How she kept her back to the wall and her laptop always within reach. The slight calluses on her hands that came from flying hundreds of hours in experimental aircraft with non-standard control configurations. Thorn gathered her materials as the briefing ended, movements efficient and precise. She gave no indication that she knew her cover had been compromised. The other pilots filed out, maintaining their bubble of isolation around her. Viper remained in his seat, mind churning. His own classified past meant he recognized the significance of that tattoo, but it also placed him in an impossible position. If he revealed his knowledge, he risked compromising whatever critical mission had brought a Ghostwing operative to Langley. But if he stayed silent, he would have to continue watching the squadron's systematic harassment of one of the most elite pilots in the service. He gathered his own materials, studying Thorn's reflection in the briefing room window as she left. Her expression remained carefully neutral, giving no hint of the extraordinary skills and experience he now knew she possessed. She carried the weight of her secret mission alone, enduring daily humiliation and sabotage without the ability to defend herself. The Ghostwing tattoo was meant to be their most closely guarded identifier, visible only to other members of the unit. Its exposure, even for a split second, could compromise years of deep cover operations. Yet Viper had seen it, and now he carried the weight of that knowledge. He watched her disappear down the hallway, maintaining her facade of the struggling female pilot trying to prove herself in a male-dominated world. But now he saw beneath that carefully constructed image to the truth. She was a highly trained operative on a mission critical enough to justify sacrificing her reputation and career. The question that burned in his mind was, what threat to national security could be serious enough to embed a Ghostwing operative in his squadron? And how could he help her complete her mission without revealing that he knew her secret? Later that evening, Captain Rodriguez found Lieutenant Thorn alone in the squadron's ready room, methodically reviewing flight data on her laptop. The room was dimly lit, most of the other pilots having left for the day. He closed the door quietly behind him and cleared his throat. "That's an interesting tattoo you have, Lieutenant," he said softly. "The winged dagger. Very distinctive markings on the blade." Thorn's fingers froze over her keyboard. She didn't turn around, but her posture shifted almost imperceptibly, from the struggling rookie pilot to something far more dangerous. The transformation was subtle, but unmistakable to his trained eye. "I'm not here to compromise your mission," Viper continued, keeping his voice low. "But I spent enough time in military intelligence to recognize that marking. Ghostwing doesn't send their people in without good reason." She turned slowly, studying him with eyes that now held none of the uncertainty she typically displayed. Her gaze was sharp and analytical, assessing threats and options with the speed of someone who had made split-second decisions in combat countless times. "How much do you know about Ghostwing, Captain?" she asked, her voice carrying an authority that hadn't been there before. "Enough to know that tattoo marks you as one of their elite pilots. Enough to know you're not who your file says you are." She was silent for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she gestured to the chair across from her. "Close the blinds first." Viper secured the room, then sat down. Thorn, or whoever she really was, typed a rapid sequence on her laptop. A small device on her desk blinked green. "Room's secure from electronic surveillance," she said. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Cassandra Vale, Ghostwing Combat Operations. My actual rank and identity were temporarily suspended for this mission." The revelation of her true rank hit Viper like a physical force. She outranked him significantly. What kind of operation requires a Ghostwing pilot to pose as a rookie F-22 trainee? "The kind where someone is selling our most classified flight data to foreign powers," she replied grimly. "I've spent the last 5 years flying prototype aircraft that make the Raptor look obsolete. But someone in this squadron is accessing classified performance data and passing it to hostile agents." Viper leaned forward. "That's why you're accepting the sabotage. You're not here to prove anything about female pilots." "I'm here to catch a traitor," she confirmed. "The harassment is unpleasant but useful. It gives me cover to access maintenance logs and flight data without suspicion. Everyone's so focused on trying to drive me out, they don't notice what I'm really investigating." "Your combat experience?" A small smile crossed her face. 300 combat hours in the XF-29 Shadow. It's a deep black project, a stealth fighter with capabilities I can't even hint at. The missions I flew in it will never appear in any official record. Viper whistled softly. He'd heard whispers about a classified aircraft program that went beyond the F-22, but nothing concrete. And now you're pretending to struggle with basic flight operations while hunting a security leak. "The sabotage actually makes my job easier," she explained. "Every time they tamper with my equipment, I get legitimate access to maintenance systems. I've been mapping data access patterns, tracking when and where classified information is being copied." "Do you have suspects?" She shook her head. "Several possibilities, but nothing concrete yet. The leak is careful, using multiple access points and sophisticated encryption. But they're getting bolder. The last data breach included critical performance limitations that could get our pilots killed in combat. Viper absorbed this information, understanding now why Ghostwing had sent one of their own. This wasn't just about stolen technology. It was about protecting American lives." "How can I help?" he asked simply. Colonel Vale studied him for a moment. "Keep treating me exactly as you have been, professional but distant. We can't risk changing the dynamic now, but I could use another set of eyes on the squadron's patterns and procedures. And if we catch them, then Ghostwing sends in their retrieval team, and Lieutenant Thorne quietly disappears from the program, confirming everyone's beliefs about women pilots." Her smile was slightly bitter. "The mission matters more than my reputation." Viper nodded slowly, seeing her in a completely new light. Every insult she'd endured, every act of sabotage she'd accepted without complaint, all of it sacrificed for the greater mission. The discipline and dedication required was staggering. "I understand now why they selected you for this," he said quietly. "It takes extraordinary strength to endure what you have, knowing you could end it at any time." "The mission comes first," she replied simply. "Always has, always will." She glanced at her laptop screen. "We shouldn't talk too long. People will notice." Viper stood, processing everything he'd learned. "I'll maintain your cover, Colonel. You can count on my support." She nodded, already shifting back into her role as the struggling Lieutenant Thorne. But for a moment, their eyes met with mutual respect and understanding. They were now partners in an operation far more critical than anyone in the squadron could imagine. Over the next 2 weeks, Cass maintained her cover as the struggling Lieutenant Thorne while carefully expanding her investigation. With Captain Rodriguez now providing subtle assistance, she had an extra set of eyes watching the squadron's movements. They developed a system of seemingly casual encounters that allowed them to share observations without arousing suspicion. During one maintenance inspection, Cass noticed Lieutenant Commander Hawthorne lingering near the classified documentation storage after hours. She pretended to be reviewing her failed simulator results while covertly observing his actions. Through the reflection in her tablet screen, she watched him quickly photograph pages from a technical manual with a small camera disguised as a pen. "Still trying to figure out where you went wrong, Lieutenant?" Hawthorne's mocking voice carried across the room as he noticed her presence. He hastily tucked the pen into his flight suit pocket. "Yes, sir," she replied, letting frustration color her voice. "Just trying to understand the systems better." "Some people just aren't cut out for advanced aircraft," he said with a smirk, walking past her. No shame in admitting that. Once he left, Cass carefully noted the time and which manuals had been accessed. Later that evening, she encrypted and transmitted her observations to her Ghostwing handlers through a secure channel hidden in routine maintenance requests. The next day, Captain Rodriguez casually mentioned during their pre-flight briefing that Hawthorne had been making frequent calls to Meridian Defense Systems, a contractor that had recently lost their bid for the next-generation fighter project. Cass recognized the company name. Intelligence reports had flagged them for suspicious connections to foreign investors. "Interesting timing on those calls," Viper commented quietly while reviewing her checklist. "Always right after he accesses the technical library." Cass made a note to dig deeper into Meridian's background. The connection was too convenient to be coincidental. While maintaining her facade of struggling with basic procedures, she began mapping out patterns in the squadron's security protocols and personnel movements. Something wasn't adding up. The security breach appeared too well orchestrated for a single person. She noticed that certain maintenance crews were always scheduled when classified materials were being updated. Transfer orders for personnel who had questioned security procedures were processed with unusual speed. Access logs showed patterns of data copying that occurred simultaneously in different locations. "This goes beyond Hawthorne," she whispered to Viper during a moment alone in the ready room. "Someone's manipulating assignments and transfers to facilitate the breaches." "Higher-ranking officers?" he asked, pretending to review her flight logs. "Has to be. The coordination is too perfect, the coverage too complete. Hawthorne's just one piece of it." Her suspicions were confirmed when she discovered that Colonel Brennan had approved security clearances for several Meridian consultants with questionable backgrounds. The same consultants had been present during critical system updates and performance testing. One evening, while most of the squadron was off duty, Cass carefully accessed the base's personnel database. She traced a pattern of strategic transfers. Anyone who raised concerns about security protocols or unauthorized access was quickly reassigned. The transfers had been authorized through multiple command levels, suggesting a network of compromised officers. "They've created a perfect pipeline," she explained to Viper during a maintenance check, speaking softly under the noise of equipment. "Hawthorne photographs the manuals, Meridian's people copy the data during their consultations, and anyone who might notice gets transferred out. The whole system's been carefully constructed." "How high does it go?" Viper asked, his expression grim. "I'm still mapping it out, but at least to the wing level, maybe higher. The authorization patterns suggest multiple senior officers are involved." She had to pause her explanation as other pilots entered the hangar. Resuming her role as the struggling trainee, she fumbled with her checklist while Viper made a show of correcting her mistakes. But beneath the act, her mind was racing, analyzing the implications of what she'd uncovered. The evidence was building into a disturbing picture. What had initially appeared to be a single security leak was revealing itself as an organized conspiracy. Classified flight data, performance specifications, and system vulnerabilities were being systematically harvested and transmitted through a network of compromised personnel and civilian contractors. Cass documented everything meticulously, building an airtight case that would stand up to the highest scrutiny. She knew that when Ghostwing moved to shut down the operation, there could be no loose ends, no opportunities for anyone to escape justice. Each day brought new challenges in maintaining her cover. The constant harassment and sabotage continued, but now she recognized it as useful camouflage for her true mission. Every time Colonel Brennan berated her performance or Hawthorne tampered with her equipment, it only reinforced their assumption that she was too incompetent to pose any threat to their operation. They never suspected that the struggling female pilot they worked so hard to discourage was actually gathering evidence that would expose their entire conspiracy. While they focused on driving her out of the program, she was quietly documenting their systematic betrayal of everything the uniform represented. Late one evening, while most of the squadron had left for the day, Cass sat alone in the darkened office reviewing personnel files. The soft glow of her computer screen illuminated stacks of transfer orders and performance evaluations spread across her desk. As she cross-referenced the dates and names, a disturbing pattern emerged. She pulled up Captain Sarah Martinez's file, a highly skilled pilot who had been transferred 6 months ago for inconsistent performance. Next came Lieutenant James Chen, removed after supposedly struggling with formation flights despite graduating top of his class. Major David Thompson, whose stellar record suddenly showed critical errors just before his transfer. Cass's hands trembled as she laid out the timeline. Every single one of these pilots had something in common. They were all exceptional aviators who had started asking questions about irregular maintenance schedules or unauthorized access to classified areas. It wasn't random, she whispered to herself, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. He was getting rid of anyone who might notice. The door creaked behind her. Cass quickly minimized the files but relaxed slightly when she saw Captain Rodriguez enter the office. "You need to see this," she said quietly, motioning him over. "Look at the pattern." Viper leaned over her shoulder as she brought the files back up. "All top performers," he noted, his voice tight. "Each transferred within weeks of raising security concerns." "Brennan wasn't just being prejudiced when he targeted me," Cass explained, pulling up more records. "He saw my real scores from the academy, my combat experience. He knew someone with my background would spot the security breaches quickly." She opened another file showing maintenance logs. "See these schedule changes? Every time one of these pilots started noticing irregularities, Brennan would manufacture performance issues. Poor simulator results, failed check rides, sudden problems with basic procedures." "Just like what he's doing to you now," Viper said, his face grim in the dim light. "Exactly. But he's not doing it because I'm a woman." Cass stood up and began pacing the small office. "That's just his cover story. He's using institutional bias as camouflage for something much worse." She pulled up Colonel Brennan's personnel file, noting the timing of his assignment to the squadron. "Look at this. He took command right when the security breaches started. Within 3 months, he had transferred out 4 of our most experienced pilots. And replaced them with people who either wouldn't notice or wouldn't care," Viper added, seeing the pattern clearly now. "The sexism, the harassment, it's all theater," Cass said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "He's counting on everyone being so focused on the gender issue that they won't see what's really happening. Every competent pilot who might have spotted the security leaks gets discredited and transferred out." She showed Viper another set of records. "These are the replacement pilots he brought in. All of them have connections to Meridian Defense or other contractors with suspicious foreign ties. He's not just protecting the conspiracy, he's actively staffing the squadron with compromised personnel. That's why he came down so hard on you after the simulator incident," Viper realized. "He needed to discredit you completely before you could start investigating." "Right. The more public the humiliation, the less likely anyone would take my concerns seriously." Cass sat back down, rubbing her temples. "If I tried to report security violations now, everyone would just assume I was making excuses for my own failures." The scope of Brennan's deception was staggering. He had weaponized existing prejudices, using them as cover for a systematic dismantling of squadron security. Anyone skilled enough to detect the breaches was labeled incompetent and removed. Meanwhile, he filled their positions with pilots who were either complicit or too inexperienced to recognize what was happening. "He's been playing everyone," Cass said quietly. "The other pilots think they're protecting the squadron from political correctness gone wrong. They have no idea they're actually helping him compromise national security. And the brass above him only see the surface story. A traditional commander maintaining high standards against social pressure," Viper added. "It's brilliant in its simplicity." "That's why my mission here is so crucial," Cass said, gathering the files into a secure folder. "We're not just fighting discrimination. We're trying to stop a calculated effort to steal classified technology. Brennan isn't a prejudiced commander trying to keep women out of fighters. He's a traitor using bias as a smokescreen while he sells out his country." The revelation transformed everything Cass had experienced since arriving at the squadron. Every snide comment, every act of sabotage, every public humiliation had been carefully orchestrated. Not out of simple prejudice, but as part of a deliberate strategy to protect an espionage operation. She looked at Viper. Her expression hardened with determination. "We need to move carefully now. Brennan didn't target me because I'm a woman. He targeted me because he recognized I was a threat. If he realizes I've figured out his real game, this whole operation could blow up in our faces." The office fell silent as they both absorbed the implications. What had seemed like a straightforward case of discrimination had revealed itself as something far more sinister. Colonel Brennan wasn't just an obstacle to progress. He was the mastermind of a sophisticated conspiracy that had compromised national security at its highest levels. The night air hung heavy with unusual stillness as Cass walked the perimeter of the base. Despite being grounded, She had permission for basic security duties, a small concession that kept her visible but harmless in Colonel Brennan's eyes. The regularly scheduled night training exercise meant most personnel were occupied at the far end of the base, leaving the main facilities eerily quiet. Through the darkness, she noticed something off about the security lighting near the F-22 hangar. 3 of the flood lamps were dark when they should have been active. Her combat instincts, honed through years of classified missions, immediately heightened to full alert. Cass pulled out her phone to call base security but found no signal. She tried her radio next, nothing but static. Her heart rate quickened as she recognized the telltale signs of signal jamming. This wasn't a technical malfunction, it was deliberate interference. Moving silently along the hangar's shadow line, she caught movement near the side entrance. 3 figures in dark tactical gear were working on the electronic lock. Their equipment and movements screamed professional military training. These weren't common thieves. "Echo team in position," one of them whispered in accented English. "Proceeding with primary objective." Cass pressed herself against the wall, processing the situation rapidly. The foreign operatives had timed their infiltration perfectly with the night exercise, when most of the base's security forces would be occupied elsewhere. With communications jammed, she had no way to alert anyone through official channels. The magnitude of the threat became clear as she observed their gear, specialized tools for accessing and copying classified flight systems. They weren't here to steal the aircraft itself. They wanted the F-22's stealth technology data. This was the endgame of the conspiracy she'd been investigating. Her mind raced through options. Base protocol required her to report to her commanding officer, but Brennan was likely complicit. The security forces were too far away, engaged in the training exercise. Every minute she delayed increased the risk of the intruders accessing classified systems. The sound of the electronic lock disengaging snapped her attention back. The infiltrators had breached the hangar. They were moving with practiced efficiency, clearly working from detailed intelligence about the facility's layout and security measures. Cass felt the weight of her undercover identity pressing down on her. Lieutenant Cassandra Thorne was grounded, stripped of flight status, with no authority to act. But her true identity as Lieutenant Colonel Vale carried a higher responsibility, protecting classified technology at all costs. She watched as the intruders disappeared into the hangar, knowing she faced an impossible choice. Taking action would mean blowing her cover and potentially compromising months of careful investigation. But standing by while foreign agents stole classified technology was unthinkable. Through the hangar's side window, she could see them setting up specialized equipment near one of the F-22's diagnostic ports. They were moving fast, professional, and practiced. They'd have the data copied within minutes. Cass checked her sidearm. Standard issue for security duty, even while grounded. It wasn't much against their tactical gear, but it was better than nothing. The responsible course would be to maintain her cover, document their activities, and report through proper channels later. But as she watched them connect their devices to the aircraft's systems, she knew she couldn't wait. This wasn't just about her mission anymore. If they succeeded in copying the stealth technology data, the damage to national security would be severe. She keyed her radio one last time, hoping for any response. The jamming remained active, filling her earpiece with static. The intruders had planned well, isolating this section of the base completely. Through the window, she saw one of them give a thumbs-up signal. The data transfer had begun. Time had run out for careful consideration. Cass took a deep breath, knowing her next actions would shatter months of careful undercover work. Her mission to expose the security leaks would be compromised, but letting foreign operatives walk away with classified technology was not an option. She drew her sidearm and moved toward the hangar entrance, her training taking over as she planned her approach. The grounded, incompetent pilot, Lieutenant Thorne, was about to disappear. In her place, Lieutenant Colonel Vale would do what she had been trained for, protecting American military technology, regardless of the personal cost. The infiltrators' presence confirmed everything she had suspected about the foreign conspiracy. Now she had to stop them, even if it meant sacrificing her deeper mission. As she positioned herself by the door, she could hear them speaking quietly inside, coordinating their data theft with practiced efficiency. Her cover identity as the squadron's failed female pilot had served its purpose, leading her to uncover this conspiracy. But now that conspiracy had escalated to immediate physical danger, forcing her hand. With communications jammed and no way to call for backup, she was the only thing standing between these foreign agents and some of America's most classified military technology. Cass moved swiftly through the hangar's shadows, her mind racing through calculations. The infiltrators had a getaway plane, standard protocol for this type of operation. They'd need something fast and stealthy to escape with the stolen data. Her years of experience told her they wouldn't risk a ground escape with such valuable intelligence. The F-22 Raptor loomed before her, its sleek form barely visible in the dim emergency lighting. She knew every inch of this aircraft, far beyond what her cover identity suggested. As she approached the cockpit, muscle memory from countless classified missions took over. Her fingers flew across the startup sequence, the familiar hum of systems coming online providing a strange comfort. The infiltrators had disabled the standard security protocols, ironically making her unauthorized access easier. They'd never expect someone to take off during their operation. "What the?" One of the intruders spotted her in the cockpit. They rushed toward the aircraft, but Cass had already sealed the canopy. The pre-flight sequence that usually took minutes was compressed into seconds under her expert hands. Through the cockpit glass, she saw them scrambling to their radio sets. They'd have their own aircraft on standby, just as she'd predicted. The wheels of the F-22 left the ground just as warning shots pinged off the fuselage. She pushed the throttle forward, feeling the raw power of the engine respond instantly to her touch. "Unidentified aircraft, you are in restricted airspace," the tower controller's voice crackled through her radio. The jamming was directional, focused on ground communications. "Land immediately, or you will be fired upon." Cass kept climbing, knowing she had minutes before they scrambled interceptors. Right on cue, a dark shape lifted off from a hidden runway several miles away, the infiltrators' escape aircraft. Its profile was wrong for any authorized military plane, confirming her suspicions about foreign involvement. She banked the F-22 hard, pushing it to speeds that would have seemed impossible during her training flights. The enemy aircraft was fast, but she knew the Raptor's capabilities better than anyone outside the classified test program. Her hands moved with practiced precision, executing maneuvers that pushed the very edges of the aircraft's design specifications. Ground radar operators watched in disbelief as their screens showed the F-22 performing turns and climbs that should have torn the aircraft apart. The mysterious pilot was flying in ways that defied their understanding of the aircraft's limitations. "Tower, are you seeing this?" one operator radioed. "Whoever's flying that Raptor is pulling moves I've never seen before." The enemy aircraft climbed sharply, trying to use cloud cover for concealment. Cass anticipated the move, having used similar tactics herself in combat. She rolled the F-22 into a vertical climb that no normal pilot would attempt, cutting through the clouds at an angle that put her directly in their path. The night sky lit up as she engaged the enemy aircraft, forcing them to dive to avoid her superior position. She stayed with them through every evasive maneuver, demonstrating a level of skill that had the ground crews watching in stunned silence. "That's not possible," she heard someone say over the radio. "The G-forces alone should have blacked out any pilot." But Cass had flown aircraft far more demanding than the F-22. Her classified missions and experimental fighters had prepared her for exactly this type of engagement. She pushed the Raptor through a series of complex maneuvers, slowly forcing the enemy aircraft away from populated areas. The infiltrators tried one last desperate move, dropping to treetop level to escape. It was a fatal mistake. Cass had trained for low-altitude pursuit in the mountains of Syria, in aircraft far less stable than the F-22. She stayed with them through every turn, slowly closing the distance. A precise burst of fire clipped their right engine. She watched as their aircraft spiraled down, its pilots ejecting moments before it crashed in an uninhabited forest area. Search and rescue would find them soon enough, along with evidence of their mission. As she banked the F-22 back toward the base, Cass knew her cover was completely blown. No one would believe Lieutenant Thorne, the incompetent pilot, could have flown that mission. The radio chatter confirmed it. She had just demonstrated abilities that went far beyond any normal pilot training. "Langley Tower, this is Raptor 27, she transmitted. using her official call sign for the first time since arriving at the base. Enemy aircraft down, pilots ejected, requesting priority landing clearance. The stunned silence that followed told her everything. Her extraordinary flying skills had been witnessed by dozens of ground personnel and radar operators. There would be no going back to her undercover role now. The lights of the runway appeared ahead as she lined up for landing. She could already see the gathering crowd of base personnel, drawn by the unprecedented display of flying they had just witnessed. Among them would be Colonel Brennan and Lieutenant Commander Hawthorne, watching as their carefully constructed conspiracy began to unravel. The F-22's wheels touched down smoothly on the runway as emergency vehicles converged from all directions, their lights painting the tarmac in sweeping patterns of red and blue. Cass powered down the engines with practiced efficiency, her movements precise despite the growing crowd of onlookers gathering near the taxiway. Colonel Brennan stood at the front of the assembly, his face twisted with barely contained rage. As soon as the aircraft came to a complete stop, he gestured sharply to the military police units flanking him. "Lieutenant Thorne, you are under arrest for unauthorized use of military aircraft and direct violation of standing orders." Brennan's voice boomed across the tarmac as Cass opened the cockpit. "MPs, take her into custody immediately." Two military police officers approached the aircraft as Cass descended the ladder. She maintained her composure, keeping her movements deliberate and non-threatening. The gathered crowd of base personnel watched in tense silence as the MPs reached for their handcuffs. "You've committed multiple violations of military regulations," Brennan continued, stepping forward. "Theft of military aircraft, disobeying direct orders, endangering base security." "The only one endangering base security is you, Colonel." Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through the night air. He emerged from the crowd, accompanied by 4 stern-faced men in dark suits. Their badges identified them as military intelligence officers. Brennan's face paled visibly. "This is a base security matter, Captain. You have no authority." "Actually, he has full authority," one of the intelligence officers stepped forward. "I'm Agent Wilson, Defense Intelligence Agency. Lieutenant Colonel Vale has been operating under our direct supervision for the past 3 months." A murmur rippled through the crowd at the mention of Cass's real rank. Lieutenant Commander Hawthorne pushed his way forward, his usual arrogance replaced by growing panic. "This is ridiculous," Hawthorne protested. "She's just a lieutenant who stole an aircraft. She needs to be arrested before she can reveal the full extent of your espionage operation," Agent Wilson interrupted. He nodded to his colleagues, who moved to flank both Brennan and Hawthorne. "We have extensive evidence of your collaboration with foreign agents, including the photographs you've been taking of classified technical manuals." The military police officers who had been approaching Cass stopped in their tracks, looking uncertainly between her and Brennan. Captain Rodriguez stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly across the tarmac. "Lieutenant Colonel Vale is one of the most decorated pilots in the Air Force's classified programs," he announced. "Her assignment here was part of an ongoing investigation into security breaches in the F-22 program. The display of flying you just witnessed should make it clear she's far more than the struggling pilot you've been led to believe." Brennan's composure cracked completely. "You have no proof of any wrongdoing. This is all circumstantial." "We have proof of everything, Colonel," Agent Wilson cut in, "including the financial irregularities that made you vulnerable to blackmail in the first place. Your foreign handlers were quite thorough in documenting their leverage over you." The intelligence officers moved in, producing handcuffs. Hawthorne tried to back away but found himself blocked by the crowd of shocked pilots and ground crew. "Your systematic removal of competent pilots who might have discovered the security breach was clever." Cass spoke for the first time, her voice steady. "Using institutional bias as cover for your real agenda almost worked. Almost." The MPs who had been sent to arrest Cass now turned to assist the intelligence officers. Brennan and Hawthorne were quickly handcuffed, their faces showing the stark realization that their conspiracy had finally unraveled. "Your foreign contacts made a critical mistake tonight," Agent Wilson explained to the gathered crowd. "Their attempt to physically infiltrate the base and steal classified data provided the opportunity to catch them in the act. Lieutenant Colonel Vale's actions prevented the loss of vital military secrets." The stunned silence that had gripped the base personnel began to break. Whispers spread through the crowd as they processed the revelation that their assumptions about Cass had been completely wrong. The pilots who had participated in the sabotage campaign shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with their former target. "The investigation is ongoing," Agent Wilson continued, "but we've identified the primary conspirators. Colonel Brennan's cooperation with foreign agents went far beyond simple information sharing. He actively worked to protect their operation by removing any pilot skilled enough to notice the security breaches." As Brennan and Hawthorne were led away, Captain Rodriguez moved to stand beside Cass. The respect in his expression was evident to everyone watching. "I think it's time the squadron knew who you really are," he said quietly. Cass nodded, finally allowing her carefully maintained facade to drop. She stood straighter, her bearing reflecting years of command experience. The transformation was subtle, but unmistakable. This was no struggling lieutenant, but a highly decorated officer who had completed her mission despite months of systematic harassment and sabotage. The intelligence officers began directing base personnel to secure areas for debriefing. The night's events would require extensive documentation, and the full scope of the conspiracy was still being uncovered. But the immediate threat had been neutralized, and the truth about both Cass's identity and Brennan's treachery was finally exposed. The squadron assembled in the briefing room, their usual confident demeanor replaced by uncertain glances and shuffling feet. The room felt different now. The same space where they had witnessed Cass's simulator failure just weeks ago now held a weight of revelation and dawning understanding. Cass stood at the front, her posture reflecting years of command presence that she'd carefully hidden until now. Captain Rodriguez flanked her left side while Agent Wilson stood to her right. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across faces that showed varying degrees of shock and disbelief. "For those who haven't been fully briefed," Agent Wilson began, "you are now in the presence of Lieutenant Colonel Cassandra Vale, commanding officer of the 797th Special Operations Squadron, a unit that officially doesn't exist." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. Several pilots who had been particularly aggressive in their harassment campaign seemed to shrink in their seats. 3 months ago, Cass spoke, her voice carrying the authority she'd suppressed for so long. "We received intelligence suggesting classified F-22 systems data was being leaked to foreign operators. The breach had to be significant. Enemy aircraft were displaying countermeasures specifically designed to defeat our latest stealth technology." She activated the briefing room's main screen, displaying radar tracks from the night's engagement. "The aircraft I intercepted tonight was using advanced maneuvers that could only have come from intimate knowledge of F-22 capabilities, knowledge that was being systematically stolen and sold by people you trusted." Lieutenant Parker, one of the pilots who had helped sabotage her equipment, raised his hand hesitantly. "Ma'am, those moves you pulled tonight, the vertical reversal at Mach 1.5, that's not supposed to be possible in an F-22. "You're correct, Lieutenant," Cass acknowledged. "I've spent the last 5 years testing experimental aircraft that push those boundaries. The 797th specializes in evaluating prototype fighters that are still classified." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. These pilots, proud members of the elite F-22 program, suddenly realized they had been mocking someone who flew aircraft far more advanced than anything they'd ever seen. "Your simulator sabotage was actually quite impressive," Cass continued, a slight smile playing at her corners of her mouth. "The altered control responses matched patterns we've seen in compromised systems. It helped confirm our suspicions about how the information was being leaked." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward. "I witnessed Colonel Vale fly missions in Syria that are still classified. When I recognized her unit tattoo, I understood why she was accepting the squadron's treatment without complaint. The mission had to come first." Several pilots shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had seen that same tattoo, the winged dagger they had mocked as inappropriate for a rookie pilot. "Tonight's attempted theft would have compromised billions of dollars in classified technology," Agent Wilson added. "Colonel Vale's intervention prevented that, while also providing us the evidence needed to arrest the primary conspirators." Major Thompson, who had been quietly observing from the back, stood up. "Those maneuvers tonight, they weren't just advanced, they were perfect. You knew exactly what the aircraft could do." Cass nodded. I've logged over 2,000 hours in F-22s, Major, plus another 1,000 in aircraft I'm not cleared to discuss. Every mistake I made in training was carefully calculated to maintain my cover while gathering evidence. The realization visibly rippled through the room. Every fumbled landing, every hesitation in the simulator, every moment they had attributed to incompetence had been a performance by one of the most skilled pilots in the service. The hardest part, Cass admitted, was flying poorly enough to be convincing. Captain Rodriguez nearly caught me several times when I instinctively compensated for turbulence patterns before they fully developed. The pilots who had prided themselves on their superior skills now sat in stunned silence. They had spent months convinced they were dealing with a political appointee who didn't belong, only to discover they had been watching a master at work. Your actions, while unprofessional, actually helped maintain my cover, Cass continued. Colonel Brennan was looking for reasons to transfer out any pilot skilled enough to notice the security breaches. Your harassment campaign convinced him I wasn't a threat to his operation. The squadron members exchanged glances, their earlier arrogance replaced by a complex mix of shame and amazement. They had witnessed something extraordinary, a highly decorated officer enduring months of sabotage and humiliation to protect the very people who tormented her. A week after the dramatic revelations, Cass stood at the window of her new office, watching F-22s take off into the morning sun. The nameplate on her desk now read, Colonel Cassandra Vale, a promotion that felt both earned and surreal after months of pretending to be a lieutenant. A knock at her door drew her attention. Captain James Rodriguez entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. The easy smile they now shared was a far cry from their cautious early interactions. Thought you might need this, he said, setting 1 cup on her desk. The transfer paperwork came through. Looks like we're keeping you. Cass accepted the coffee with a warm smile. I had 3 different bases requesting me after everything came out, but something about Langley feels right. The squadron needs you, Viper said, moving closer. These pilots are good, but they need someone to show them what excellence really looks like. She turned to face him fully. They need both of us, James. Your integrity during this whole mess proved that. The morning light caught his prematurely gray temples, and Cass found herself studying his sharp features. Their relationship had transformed so gradually, from instructor and student, to conspirators, to something deeper neither had expected. The vote was unanimous, he said. Every single pilot supported you taking command, even Thompson, and you know how he feels about change. Cass laughed. Amazing what a little Mach 1.5 vertical reversal will do for earning respect. It wasn't just the flying. Viper stepped closer, his voice softening. It was how you handled everything. The sabotage, the harassment. You could have destroyed careers in retaliation. Instead, you're focused on rebuilding. These are good pilots who lost their way, she said. They forgot that excellence isn't about protecting territory. It's about pushing boundaries and lifting each other up. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Their shared mission had forged a connection that went beyond professional respect. The training schedule you proposed is ambitious, Viper said, changing topics slightly. Teaching advanced maneuvers that aren't even in the official manual. Time to show them what these birds can really do, Cass smiled. Starting with you. I saw how you tracked that vertical reversal. You're ready to learn the advanced stuff. Looking forward to it, he said, then hesitated before continuing. About dinner tonight. 1,900 hours your place, she confirmed. Unless you're having second thoughts about dating your former student? His laugh filled the office. Former student who turned out to be my superior officer and one of the most decorated pilots in the service? I think I can handle it. Their personal relationship had developed naturally alongside their professional partnership. What started as cautious alliance had grown into deep trust, and finally into something neither had expected to find in the middle of an espionage investigation. A group of pilots passed by her office window, snapping sharp salutes that held genuine respect rather than the barely concealed contempt of months past. The squadron's transformation was already visible in 100 small ways. The first female F-22 squadron commander, Viper mused, though I guess that was always the plan, wasn't it? Actually, no, Cass leaned against her desk. The original mission was strictly about catching the security breach. Staying here, rebuilding the squadron? That's a choice I made because I saw the potential. And here I thought I was the reason you stayed, he teased. You're definitely a factor, Captain Rodriguez, she smiled. But this is bigger than us. These pilots needed to learn that true strength comes from supporting each other, not tearing people down. Now we have the chance to build something special. Viper moved to stand beside her at the window, their shoulders touching as they watched another F-22 lift into the sky. From conspiracy to community. Not bad for a few months' work, Colonel. The real work is just beginning, she said. But for the first time, I get to do it as myself. No more hiding skills, no more pretending to fail. Just excellence, integrity, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible. He took her hand, a gesture that felt both professional and intimate. I can't think of anyone better to lead that charge. The morning sun caught the wings of the F-22s outside, their sleek forms embodying both the technical excellence and human potential Cass had always seen in the program. What had started as an undercover mission had transformed into an opportunity to reshape the future of fighter aviation, with a partner who understood both her mission and her heart. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.